I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Salams, everybody. The Prophet didn't watch porn. Then again, the Prophet didn't have porn. Astaghfirullah. I don't know if Islam has interventions, but Rami, get your shit together. We are talking HULU'S RAMY, episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1, Baya, and episode 2, Can You Hear Me Now? Right now with the illustrious panel of esteemed experts. Coming back for the show, my co-host and ride or die, the cultural attaché known as Nikki Bailey.
Hey, y'all.
And joining us for the first time, all the way from his gay, Muslim, conservative, extremist views, Amir Yas is in the building.
Hi, y'all. Not extremist, but we'll go with it. Works for me.
That's what all extremists say, Amir Yas. And of course, we have the interpreter of interpreters, our United Nations go-to, Mina Wahab, is here with us, and her eyeshadow is present as well.
Yes, I am.
It's good to see and hear all of you. It's good to see and hear Rami back on Hulu, coming off an amazing season 1. Something that Nikki and I predicted did happen. Of course, Rami winning the Golden Globe and having one of the best speeches of all time just on that stage. It was just perfect. And considering the times today, Rami is more needed now than ever. We're going to be breaking down episodes 1 and 2. We're going to do them individually. With episode 1, we're going to be breaking it down first. Episode 1, Baya, we're going to break it down as thus. Rami being depressed, of course. Uncle Nassim, a fan favorite, returns. The boss's dinner, the dynamic at that dinner table and all the activities within. Sheikh Malik, where we get a Mahershala Ali sighting, and it's the first of many. Rami's confession.
Yay!
We do have a special segment, Ramining, where we will break down one part of the show that is specifically culturally, customatically, or just in general Arab, and Mina will express it to us. We will be keeping our eyes out for news and gossip. And because this is a binge show, we won't be predicting as much because we will be binge watching it with all of you. Let's start with our overall impressions and thoughts on the first episode of season 2, Baya. Let's start with Mina Wahab.
Hey, so I really love how at the end of season 1, he goes to Egypt back to get in touch with his cultural roots, and then he comes back, obviously very depressed in the beginning of season 1, but we know that there's going to be some sort of shift. So overall thoughts, I love that now he's like going in a different direction of like just trying to explore like what it means to be Arab American, what it means to be Muslim in America, and just like going in that path and figuring that out alongside his family and friends.
Well, I hope that you have a lot of insight being an Arab American and a Muslim in America yourself. I'm sure that's going to bring a lot of perspective to the rest of our panel. Let's go over to Amir Yas.
I was actually quite triggered by this episode because of the nature of just where Rami was at and with his family and the way they were kind of shutting him down when he was even trying to be more spiritual. That happens a lot in Islam. I'm Muslim myself. If you try to follow the Sufi path, there's a lot of shutting down. There's a lot of like, if you're trying to kind of find a different way, it can be very kind of shutting you down. So I felt kind of triggered by that. But overall, nice to see Rami again.
Well, it's nice to see you, Amir, and I'm hoping that this panel can be the therapy you clearly need. Let's talk to Nikki Bailey and see what Nikki's cultural attaché perspective is on this first episode.
First episode, first of all, you had me laughing from the very first scene, which makes me know it's going to be a fantastic season. I had to Google a few things. I didn't know. There were some words I didn't know. So that's why I had to text you guys and say, I'm 5-10 minutes behind. I'm in the Wikipedia right now. So I'm really looking forward to watching Rami on this spiritual journey. Like I really connected to this idea of having longing and the desire to be better, and I connected to the sadness and the depression of not being able to be better. So I'm excited to see the journey that he's about to embark on.
Well, it was interesting to me that Rami just jumped right into the episode. We didn't get an epilogue of what happened from Egypt. We are in the midst of his life again. We find ourselves, and this is to the conundrum of so many people who didn't understand that the show's not called Arabs. It's not called Arab Americans. It's specifically called Rami, meaning that it's a story told semi-autobiographical on his behalf or from his perspective. We get him depressed, we get him possibly addicted to porn, masturbating constantly, and we're thrown right, smacks us right in the head. Hey, this is Rami. I don't know what you've been watching or what you've been hoping for, but it's not going to cater to you or your feelings. It's going to tell the story as it's meant to be told. We get into that concept. I love how they explain what a baya is right up front, a spiritual contract, and we get the white attendee, who is played, of course, by Michael Chernis, a comedian and improv student. He gives it to the students that he thinks that he thinks he can follow on his path. He gives it to the students, and you're bound to him, and he's bound to you. Basically, the baya is that oath, that pledge of initiation to a particular Muslim leader. We get the introduction of Sufism, which is a byproduct of Islam. It's neither Sunni or Shia. It's actually more like a meticulous way of interpreting it or looking at it from a very spiritual point of view. And these things are smack in the face of all the viewers, whether you are Middle Eastern or not. And that's what Rami does best. Let's discuss this. Rami being depressed. What were your thoughts on just Rami's depression coming off the trip to Egypt, Nikki?
You know, it would have been easy to think, and everyone assumed that Rami was depressed because his granddaddy died. But I felt like, you know, he went to Egypt hoping for an aha moment. Hoping for what we call in Christianity. I'm trained in ministry, but what we call a mountaintop experience, and he was hoping to have that, and he came back without it. In fact, he came back having done some unspeakable things. So yeah, he's depressed. Makes perfect sense to me.
He is a little depressed. And of course, he also is missing his cousin that he slept with. Let's not forget that. A lot of mountaintops in Islam as well. If Muhammad can't go to the mountain, then the mountain's going to come to Muhammad. Amir Yas, what were your thoughts?
So I actually have personal experience with this. When I went to Mecca,
You slept with your cousin?
Listen, in Middle Eastern culture, it's not as frowned upon as American culture. So I just want to make that very clear. So I think that like a lot of people back in the day in Middle Eastern culture would get married to second cousins. So I think that, again, I'm not like defending it. I'm just saying that
I just want to throw this out there for everyone. A lot of that happened in Western and Christian culture as well. A lot of people forget these things. That the paths are very similar. Islam is a newer religion, so maybe it is a little behind on catching up, but we are all pretty much on the same path, no matter what your religious status.
Absolutely.
Please tell us about this Mecca trip that was so enlightening.
So that's what I thought it was going to be, Tehran. So then when I came back, I did kind of feel a little bit of depression because you have this idea of going to, you know, whether it's your homeland or going to Mecca or a religious place or Egypt, and coming back with these expectations of having your life be fixed. And I think that, again, that's a perfect time for him to get on the Sufi path. My sister and my mom are actually Sufi. And Sufism, if a lot of people don't know, is related to Rumi and Hafiz. So, you know, all the white girls that quote Rumi all over Instagram, he is a Sufi. So that is definitely something that a lot of people might not know.
No way, Persian people taking credit for something. Oh my gosh, that's new.
It's the truth, Tehran.
I'm not saying it's not.
But I do want to quickly go back to his depression because I think a lot of people might be hard on him because they're like, oh, why is he kind of getting stuck? But we've all been in positions, even in quarantine, where we're kind of just a little bit lost. So I think it's nice to see the character kind of go through that and be very honest about where he's at.
Interesting. And Mina?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think especially with him having been torn between two different identities, both his American identity and his Arab identity, I think it's really difficult to navigate that, especially when his household seems to be a little bit more conservative. I mean, he fasts during Ramadan, but then he still has premarital sex and does other things that are against Islam. and obviously there is like a lot of judgment within the Muslim community and within the Arabic community as well. I mean, we see that from his friends who are like judging him and saying like, what are you doing, man? His parents are kind of like on his case. We see the disparity between like how he's treated versus his sister is treated. And I think after going to Egypt and sleeping with his cousin and being confused about that, I mean, I think that adds a whole other layer because he didn't get the epiphany that he wanted to. As Nikki was talking about, he didn't have that revelation on top of the mountain. So he probably was expecting something. His expectations were not met with the reality that he faced. And he came back feeling like, oh, what have I done? I'm working this job with my uncle who's like pretty racist that I'm not even passionate about. It was just supposed to be a job to make money. And he just feels lost right now again. And I think it's probably a feeling that a lot of people can relate to, not just Arab Americans. I think it's a very relatable feeling to be in a place of in between, and not exactly like know where you fit in.
I appreciate that, Mina.
I was going to say that such a it's relatable for everybody, partly because of the age range, right? Like that's sort of the age where you go through all of that, but also I think that a lot of people kind of have a seeker's heart and don't know how to seek and don't know, where to get the answers. So I think that's part of why this show speaks to so many people.
The show is definitely more than just a show for people of Middle Eastern heritage. Sure, on this panel, we have two Persians. And by two, I mean Amir's full Persian. Mina and I are both half. Mina's actually Iraqi, but that's basically as Persian and Arab as you can be. So I understand the path that we're on. I appreciate the vulnerability that Ramy displayed. The masturbation scenes did not sit so well with me, not only because I found them a bit crude, but also because Ramy tended to have all his clothes on when he was doing it. I'm like, where they do that at, bro? However, the concept is that Ramy is a real person and real people do real things. And while we tend to think of real things as criminal acts, the realest things are just the normalist acts, which are things like masturbating, sleeping, and taking a poop. So it's interesting that Ramy does basically all three of these things as we go into this and delve into his depression. He does return to work with Uncle Nassim, a fan favorite despite his misogynistic bigotry ways.
Love Uncle Nassim.
What are your thoughts
Love
on Uncle Nassim and Ramy's interaction with the emasculating speech, Mina?
I think Uncle Nassim is hilarious, even though what he says is extremely problematic and anti-Semitic. I think that
he can't be anti-Semitic. He's Arab. He is Semitic.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they said in season 1. And it's funny. I mean, I feel like a lot of Middle Eastern families have like that one person that's kind of like that, even if they try to hide it and say, no, we're not racist. There's a lot of people with like outdated, problematic views that haven't, kept up with the times, and they talk about this within their families. And he's just the uncle that, like, obviously the sister is like this social justice warrior that's very, feminist, and she feels the inequality between her and her brother. And when Uncle Nassim comes in, she's very like rattled by his presence. And I feel like that's also getting to her brother as well. It's not just exclusive to the sister. So with Ramy, I think he's just tired of being talked down to, but culturally, like in the Arab culture, you don't talk back to your elders. It's really disrespectful. When someone says something problematic, you don't really talk back to them. It's really frowned upon. Probably not just in Arab culture, probably in Persian culture as well, and a lot of other cultures. It's just a sign of disrespect. So he kind of bites his tongue. His uncle's also obviously taking care of him financially by giving him a job. But there's a lot of, crazy things that he does, like supplying him with the gun to protect himself because he works at a jewelry shop. But at the same time, like I can see Uncle Nassim's perspective, like, hey, you need to protect yourself. You might be followed. Here's a gun. Like, I get that. It's probably like an old school mentality.
A lot of things that Uncle Nassim does is old school. My man Amir Yas, how old school is your uncle?
That's what I was just gonna say. Very old school. So I think Uncle Nassim, if you're Middle Eastern, everyone has an Uncle Nassim. I have heard things come out of my uncle's mouths where I'm like, you definitely can't say that. And literally my uncle was like, we can say anything we want. So I think that if you take Uncle Nassim with that kind of grain of salt, then you don't take him too seriously. Like when he dropped his pants and then grabbed the gun from the holster, I was like, this is comedic gold. Like, it's hilarious. I thought he was gonna, I don't know what I thought he was gonna do, but that is not what I thought. And I like Uncle Nassim. He is true to who he is, and he's not apologizing for it. So I'm here for him.
I understand. I am Uncle Nassim. Nikki Bailey.
I'll tell you what, I got an Uncle Nassim, but his name is Willie. And every family has an Uncle Nassim. He does not talk about Uncle Willie doesn't talk about, I was gonna say he doesn't talk about Jewish people, but that's not true. He does. He goes hard on everybody. So and again, also in African American culture, you don't speak back to your elders in that way. You don't check them for that stuff. So you just kind of like, yep, you're right. And I had no idea what was going to happen, what was happening in the bathroom. And I am in my office watching and screaming like, Uncle Nassim, what are you doing? What are you doing? That it was a gun, a whole extra level of funny. Uncle Nassim, I want him to have like a series, like a web series of shorts just about Uncle Nassim and the crazy crap he says.
I would love to know what everyone thought, that Uncle Nassim was going to molest a 28-year-old Rami. That's not pretty much how that works. However, I did think it's very interesting and fun. Uncle Nassim's always, there was a lack of energy in Uncle Nassim. I felt a little bit of a lack of charm this starting out this season. It wasn't as brilliant as I remember it last season, maybe because I became accustomed to Uncle Nassim. A brilliant actor. I also really enjoyed the Rami, when you were gone, when you come back, I was going to fire you. But something crazy. The customers asked about you. And then I realized they like you because you feel like them. You have Jewish energy. Your weakness makes them feel safe. They're not ready for a man like me. Donald Trump and his greatness has ruined that.
Donald Trump was too much of a man. Yes.
I know. I was like, what?
Too much of a man. Uncle Nassim's always a fan favorite because of his bluntness and his willingness to say things that are just explosive and polarizing in so many ways. And honestly, given a different set of circumstance, right now it looks like Uncle Nassim could have been president. Let's talk about the boss's dinner. So we go to this dinner with the boss, and this is a different setting for the family. We have the family introduced to an American family, the boss, his wife, and their father, who seems to be senile, the grandfather, the patriarch of the family, but just in a dilapidated president situation. This dinner included a lot of attributes, including father drinking whiskey, Dina introducing the fact that she's going to law school, but it's not Yale, and the father being slightly disappointed, even though his extremely educated daughter is now going to law school, which I'm sure Mina can attest to education levels. And also, we have the bathroom scene. Let's talk about each of these in its own dynamic, and I do want to start with Amir Yas.
Of course. I think that this scene was probably my favorite from the first two episodes, because I think that it was such a dynamic scene and it was so well written. Because there's been many times where I've even told my parents, like, drop me off a block away from my white friend's house because I don't want them to see you. Like, when you're kids, you do these things. And it was just crazy to see the dad kind of in that position. I feel like the parents, sometimes when you have immigrant parents, you become the parent and they're kind of emotionally a little bit like not as intelligent and they get kind of emotionally stuck. And I feel like the dad is still like almost like a 15-year-old trying to impress his friends by drinking the whiskey. And it was crazy to see the wife's face, and she couldn't say anything. Like, like in a normal relationship, you'd be like, what are you doing? Like, you don't drink. Like, you don't need to drink that. But, the mom, Dina, is just like, I'm sorry, the mom was like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't tell him anything. And it was just really sad to see the dad, down the whiskey and just to impress his boss. And again, it was just like the mom talking about how rich they are. There were so many scenes in that dinner moment that were just very cringy for me. But
I'm gonna have to disagree with something you said though about the emotional capability of Middle Eastern parents. I think what it was specifically a cultural difference in which a Middle Eastern parent is trying to make up for that fact by basically becoming a parody of what they think an acceptable norm would be. And that's
Mhm.
where we get the conversation with the Desperate Housewives, which
Mhm.
was extremely humorous. We get the
Yeah.
drinking of the whiskey, which the father normally doesn't do. However, obviously he's not inept at drinking because he downs the whiskey like a pro, something his
Yep.
family probably has never seen. And we also get the sense that they are trying to act or feel as American as possible, but they're
Right.
just not. It reminds me of when Superman acts human, and that's when he's a clumsy buffoon of a person, as opposed to his natural state of just being Superman. That Clark Kent is his secret identity.
Right.
Conversation that's been brought up in movies. So that's
Right.
why I want to differentiate between an emotional inability and a cultural difference in magnitude.
Well, it's a miscommunication, Tara. And I think it's when I say emotionally unintelligent, I mean that if you're emotionally intelligent or able to have conversations, you are able to have more communication. And unfortunately, with Middle Eastern parents, there's a shutdown, right? Even when he said, even when Rami said, I want to be more spiritual, they were like shutting it down. That's what I mean. I don't mean that they're not intelligent. What I mean is that they're not able to have conversations. You can tell there's four people living in a house and no one is communicating on the same plane, which is why there's such a disconnect.
Nikki, did you feel the same disconnect?
Uh, in the when they were at the boss's house or
Yes.
at home. At the boss's house, I think I'm always really interested about the differences in terms of culture for people when it's just sort of the racially cultural difference versus the cultural experience of immigrant parents. Um, I I pretty sure I've seen my dad act like an idiot in front of his boss because
Mm.
he felt like he had to. You know, like I'm pretty sure that that's a pretty um, that's something that a lot of people have experienced. I don't think though that the thing that I thought was so interesting is how hard it is to have to try to be American in that
Mhm.
particular way. And to me, I thought, wow, these are things I don't ever think about. Like I wouldn't have been sitting at that dinner trying to think, how can I be more relatable to these people? And
Mhm.
so that was a really interesting dynamic to me to watch, and also to sort of see like where it was tested. You know, like Dina kind of being like, I'm going to law school, but probably not Stanford. Like,
Mm.
and her kind of uh like she kind of makes her dad a little happy, but kind of takes it, but not as happy as he could be because it's not Stanford. So I felt there was a cultural disconnect. I think that it was interesting because in some ways I related, and in some ways I was like, I can't imagine what that's like.
I understand. Mina, do you have the ability to imagine what that's like?
Not really. I don't think I've like witnessed something like that. I think what's really important to note in this scene though is that there's not only a cultural barrier, there's like a huge socioeconomic barrier as well. And I think that's what causes like this awkward cringe moment that you guys are referring to. I think the fact that they're kind of walking into someone's home. Obviously, the boss is super privileged, kids going to Stanford. They just look like a very well to do family. And you notice that in the way that the mother talks about things, the Arab mother talks when she makes the Desperate Housewives reference and then makes the comment about how, the white mom reminds her of like the woman in Desperate Housewives that kills herself and lives in a nice house. I thought it was really funny. I think there's a lot of unintentional dark humor in the Arab culture, especially in the Iraqi culture. I can definitely attest to that. Like growing up, like I heard so many dark jokes. It's just like ingrained in our experience because of the struggles of the Arab community and like what Arabs have had to go through in their homeland, especially coming here. I mean, I've even had like a cousin say stuff like during 4th of July, like, oh, it reminds me of home, like making a dark joke about the bombings in Iraq, which is really sad, but it's a way that they cope with loss, with grief, but it also comes out unintentionally, as we saw in the scene. And it's really funny, but very, very uncomfortable, especially to people who aren't used to that.
Did anyone do a fact check if it's Eva Longoria or Jessica Alba in Desperate Housewives? Because I think we really need to do that.
It's
Yeah,
Eva Longoria.
I disagree with both of you. Mesa says it's Jessica Alba. The guy from Texas says it's Jessica Alba. Then it's definitely Jessica Alba. We also have this scene where Rami goes into the bathroom, has a sort of Rorschach test where every image becomes one of vagina or sexual for him. Begins possibly about to masturbate. The grandfather, senile as he is, comes inside the bathroom unannounced and unaware that Rami is there, washes his hands, uses a towel, then picks up the gun that Uncle Nassim had given Rami that was placed on the basket of the table, and points it at Rami and then points it at himself, puts it in his pocket and walks away. This scene seems to be foreshadowing something else to be, because as we know in Rami, everything means something, to the point where after this dinner, Rami is so distraught, he finds himself at the mosque and meeting with the sheikh at his mosque. We also have the encounter with Michael Chernis, who is the white mosque attendee who's switching mosques. What were your thoughts on that, Nikki Bailey?
I have a question.
Yes.
I didn't get a chance to Google this while I was watching. A sheikh versus an imam. Is there a difference?
It's the differences in connotation. A sheikh is just the way you would speak or say of someone of respect, sheikh, but imam is the actual position. So an imam is akin to a pastor or a priest in this term. Unless you're talking about the imams, which takes it to the level of prophets, that's a whole different conversation. But in this term, we are speaking about the pastor of the mosque, as we metaphorically analogize it to a church.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was, first of all, really excited to see Mahershala Ali. I would watch him.
Well, this is before Mahershala. We're actually at Rami's original mosque where he's talking.
Where he runs into Bro. Yeah,
Exactly.
where he runs into Michael the Bro. Yeah. Yeah. I love that character, that Michael character, and how sincere he is, and how passionate he is. And so, yeah, I don't know that I have more to say about that than that. I skipped ahead. I was in the wrong place. I apologize.
It's okay, Mina.
So that interaction, I feel like that's one reason a lot of people stray away from Islam, because they see people who are very judgmental, who are so rigid with the guidelines of it, just as if you were to go to a church that would be like not okay with a lot of things that are forbidden in the Bible. Because there are people who interpret the Quran really strictly. There are people who interpret it a little bit more liberally. There's always a different interpretation, kind of like the Constitution, the Bible, any sort of book that is law or religion based. So I think that with that scene in particular, a lot of people they'll say that the Imam kind of said, I think he said something like astaghfirullah, like, oh, don't say this, like, just go do wudu, like, that's all you need to do, like, cleanse yourself. Wudu is something you do before prayer, where you like wash in like a very meticulous fashion, like your fingernails, your hands, your legs, you do it before praying. So I think he is almost like very dismissive of Rami, just saying like, I kind of like don't want to hear it. And it's like, if you are someone looking for guidance from the one person that you feel can help you because you're turning to Islam, that's not what you want to hear, because that's going to turn you away from the religion. And that's why he went to go check out Sufism, is for that very reason. So I think that scene probably resonates with a lot of people who feel like they're being shamed for their sins instead of being listened to and understood.
Sorry, I now know where we are in the conversation, so I'm going to just jump back in real quick.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. I have to say, I served as a pastor in a church for a year.
Wow.
And part of why I stopped is because as a queer person, and as a young person, I was like, I can't be this rigid rule keeper type person. Like, I can't, this is not the kind of ministry I want to do. And so I really, really resonated with that, like wanting to be able to talk to someone about something that is deeply intimate and deeply private. And I'm scared about what you're going to think and what God's going to think. And then I sit down to tell you and you shame me. And that's, when all of my friends are pastors and we're always talking about how do you get people back in church? Well, stop acting like masturbation's not normal. Like have real conversations with real people about real stuff, and let's see what happens. So yes, thank you.
Amir, do you have a similar experience?
Well, I mean, being a queer Muslim, I've heard a lot of crazy things, in the mosque. Like if you masturbate, you're gonna have pregnant hands on Judgment Day. I was asked by an imam, which I asked about premarital sex. He kicked me out of his office. So I think there's a lot of the very similarities with Rami. He's just on a quest for spirituality. And unfortunately, to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. And a lot of these spiritual leaders don't want to get into it. They're like, I don't want to hear it. They're like closing their ears like children. And, you're not going to move forward. So I'm kind of team Rami, and I'm team the revert that wants to leave, because that's pretty effed up. Someone's there trying to get too close to God, and
it can
let
be.
them do that.
It can be effed up. I remember one time I went to a mosque and yelled, F Shaitan, and they kicked me out. Like, why? I thought that's what the page was. The three things that the imam says at Rami's original church, the three solutions he throws out are read the last three surahs of the Quran every night and it will help keep the shaitan away. Maintain wudu throughout the day because it will keep Allah on your mind, and try fasting, which Rami has obviously tried fasting during Ramadan and basically has done many of these things and still doesn't find any solace. So he is now taken to the Sufi mosque and meets Sheikh Malik. Mahershala Ali is on the screen. Amir, yes.
Yes, thank you for letting me start this. I am obsessed, and I deep dived into his history. The actor himself also converted to Islam in 2000. So I think that, again, I think Rami is so smart because it's all about hiring people who understand the experience. Unless you've walked through Islam, you don't understand how it's simultaneously beautiful and simultaneously very effed up. It is a very interesting religion. It has two sides of the coin. It is so dynamic, much like our people. The religion itself is very dynamic.
Like
so,
any religion or any groups of people can be.
Absolutely. And I'm Muslim, so I'm speaking from that. Muslim, not Muslim. We learned that in the show as well. So
episode
Muslim,
2, which we will be getting to.
We will get to. So I think seeing this character come to life and the way that he operates, again, telling his student to push him off the ledge, it's very much like a parable we would read in something that goes along with the Quran called a hadith. So it's very prophet-like, and the way that he hugged and talked about love. And I think Rami was there for the theatrics of it all.
It was. And of course, Mahershala Ali is actually born Mahershala al-Shabazz Gilmore because his mother, much like Nikki, is a pastor. And people don't realize Mahershala al-Shabazz is actually a Christian name. It's a name from the Bible. So his name change isn't reflective of his Islam, only the last name Ali. Mina, what were your thoughts on seeing Sheikh Malik?
I really was excited to see Mahershala Ali. He's a phenomenal actor. I wasn't expecting it, but then when I watched the trailer, I was like, oh, he makes an appearance. Okay, I wonder, what he's gonna say. But there's like a certain strength to his character where he, is not judgmental, but still has like these guidelines for how you have to come to him. And that was something that I really liked. It almost felt like, a monk like training someone about the ways to be. I don't know. I really enjoyed watching the interactions between the two, especially like when we move on to episode 2, we can talk more about like how he infuses kindness into Islam and, kind of like the Christian messaging of be kind to your neighbor. I really enjoyed watching a lot of that because to be honest, I don't really know a lot about Sufi Islam because I'm not Sufi. I am Muslim, but I'm not Sufi Muslim.
I think a lot of Persians would be a lot more familiar with Sufism simply because it is more prominent. However, we're all going to be very acclimated to it by the end of Rami, I'm sure. Nikki, what were your thoughts?
I was uncomfortable. I One of the things that I find really uncomfortable in Christianity is the cult of personality that is formed around pastors and clergy. And so when Michael was telling Rami, yo, this sheikh has a direct link to God. I was like, no, 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 no. Like, let's rein in the expectations because it's a lot of pressure for people who are spiritual leaders to have that thought of that, to have that thought of you, that you have some direct link to God and special abilities and special powers. On the other hand, I loved when he said to Rami, I'm not just listening to your words, I'm reading your heart.
Yes.
And that to me felt like that's what spiritual guidance is. That's what when you're a seeker looking for God, looking for connection, what you need in that moment is for someone to listen to and with their hearts. And so that felt like what spirituality at its most beautiful should be.
I had an ego. I was driven by desires like you. Did you sleep with your cousin too? No, never that. But the concept is we get to meet this charismatic, enigmatic person who's going to clearly be some type of force in Rami's life, which we will get to as we see Rami confessing his sins, admitting to sleeping with his cousin, admitting to his affair, admitting to his porn addiction, and so much more, which leads us into episode 2. Episode 2, Can You Hear Me Now? We will be breaking it down as thus: the chicken is halal, even if it's not, the family dinner, hot chocolate, which we get another family dinner, hot chocolate, the Sharia protests as we see these protesters as we enter the mosque, diner friends. We get more of Mo and Ahmed, who we had missed in episode 1. We only got to see a flash of them as they were concerned. Now we get to see a lot more interaction. We get to meet Dennis, who is a new protagonist in some ways, who's going to be playing a huge part, clearly pointing towards the end or conclusion of this episode. Zainab's reluctance. Zainab, of course, being Sheikh Malik's daughter, who we get to meet. Rami cleans his room and his hard drive. A quick note to Rami's dedication: pussy Muslim. Pussy Muslim. Pussy. Okay, Dennis wants to be halal. The concept is Dennis learns how to say Muslim and actually becomes one, or does he? And then, of course, I'm throwing this out there, his lone wolf attack. No one can convince me otherwise. Let's discuss how the chicken is halal. We get a family dinner. We're all sitting around the table, and now we get the spiritual Muslim Rami is blossoming into that Amir was speaking about in regards. Amir, what were your thoughts?
Obviously, there's a lot of people with halal that a lot of people in the Muslim culture, some people say, well, just do a prayer over it and everything is halal. So I love when he said, even when it's not halal, it's halal. So I appreciated that. And I think that when you're on a new quest, religious or spiritual, you have to set up some new boundaries and things are going to change. So I'm not surprised that the family's having some pushback.
Sure, but he's being possibly a little overbearing. Mina, would you agree or disagree?
Who's being overbearing, Rami?
Rami, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like, I almost feel like he does have that holier than thou approach where like he's discovering something new. I feel like it's like that one friend that goes vegan for the first time and they're like, I can't believe you eat animals, like you're a monster. What are you doing? Like, you're gonna go to hell for this. It kind of felt like that a little bit, where he, like, if you want to like convert someone to your way of thinking, you don't speak down to them or come across as better than, you kind of share with them in the hopes that they'll adopt your messaging by communicating without expectation. But I feel like he communicated with an expectation, and I think that's very different. So it can set a lot of people off, especially when people have developed habits that they've practiced for years throughout their lives. They're not going to just quickly adopt a new way of doing things, especially when there's a power imbalance and you're one of the youngest and you're talking to your parents.
And he's talking, it almost feels like talking back, which the dad makes them realize. It reminds me of people who join Zumba. Nikki, what were your thoughts?
My thought was, I wish I would sit at my mom's table and ask her where the food came from. I wish I would. Like that is not a conversation that would have flown in my house either. And but I did feel sort of the sadness and loneliness that Rami's trying to do something huge. He's trying to make a big change, and he wants to do it with his family. He wants to do it in connection and in and I felt sad and lonely for him because I feel like I've been there myself, where I've wanted to, I'm trying to change my life, I'm trying to grow, and I want the people I love to grow with me. And you kind of have to let yourself get to the place where you realize that people are going to do what they do in their own time and in their own way. So I understand he's really excited and overzealous, and maybe that's too much. But I also felt like, yeah, I know, man. I would want somebody with me on it too.
Well, maybe some people who are overzealous and too excited are the protesters we find outside of the mosque. Sharia protests are something that's very common, especially in specific neighborhoods. This is in New Jersey. We see a lot of it there. In New York, it's happened. And of course, in places even very Arab-centric, such as Detroit and surrounding neighborhoods. So what were your thoughts on these Sharia protesters, Mina?
I as even though like I believe in freedom of speech and I think you have the right to protest whenever you want to protest in the United States under your First Amendment right, I think that it was such bad taste. But the reason that they were protesting, they felt like the mosque replaced the church that was there, even though that wasn't the case. But I even think that if there wasn't a church there and a new mosque appeared, it would be the same reaction. I don't think that it was called for. And what do they think is going to happen? They're just going to yell and the mosque is going to shut down and people are going to decide not to go there. I mean, what are they hoping to accomplish by doing that? I think a lot of these people, they come out and they're angry, and most of them wouldn't know the first thing about Islam. I feel like if you ask them, oh, look up what Islam is, they would think that it's quote unquote a terrorist religion. And a lot of people who protest things have no idea what they're even protesting to begin with. And I think that's the part that's really frustrating, is that, there is like this culture of Islamophobia, especially in certain neighborhoods in the United States. I don't think our current president is making that any better, especially with the Muslim ban during his first term. But I do think that ignorance leads to anger, and like there is a lot of fear there, and there's fear of the unknown. And I think if people don't do their research and know what it is they're protesting or what they're mad about, there's always going to be a fear and resentment there, a fear of
A
the
lot
other.
of fear and resentment. Amir, do you feel that fear and resentment from these protesters?
I do. I mean, I don't have a lot. I don't like to give people like that a lot of attention. But listen, being gay and Muslim, I have protesters from every angle on Instagram and etc. So listen, you do you. It's America. You be stupid and white. Next.
Nikki.
Yeah, you be stupid and white. And also, I think one of the things that, you're looking at, people around the country right now wanting to open back centers of worship so that they can go back to the building. But the building isn't church. The building isn't your faith. The building isn't your spiritual path. So it doesn't matter who or what is happening in that building. So the idea that because it used to be a church and now it's mosque, that's just racist bigotry. Like, and so like that makes and it was four white dudes, old white dudes who they ain't got nothing to do. They retired. So this is like their hobby, I guess, is to come out and protest the new mosque in the neighborhood. So it's infuriating. I believe in free speech, but I also believe that if you use your free speech, you might catch some hands, and
Sure.
that's okay with me.
Concept of freedom of speech obviously is that if you only believe in freedom of speech for those you agree with, then that's not freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, if you don't believe in it for those you disdain, then you don't actually believe in freedom of speech, which is why I will never be an enemy to protesters, even if I do not condone what they are protesting. We get some protests, of course, from Rami's friends at the diner. We get this diner scene, we get the friend interaction. They're reluctant, and at this diner, we get Muhammad and we get Ahmed back. We also get a new character, Dennis. What were your thoughts on Dennis, Nikki?
I thought Dennis is going to be trouble from the get-go, and it felt like a rookie convert mistake. Like like I've seen newly baptized Christians who've decided that they're going to save somebody today, and they start, and then they find out that they've bitten off more than they could chew. And I just knew that was going to not go well. And he was, so it's sad.
Mina, did you have the same feeling?
I didn't actually. I could kind of relate to like the feeling of like wanting to help someone in need. Not wanting to convert anyone, but I feel like Islam really does teach like helping your brother or your sister, especially when you see someone you like want to give them an opportunity. If you see that they can't afford something, you want to get them food, especially if they're homeless. So, I mean, that's something that the Quran preaches. It's one of the tenets of Islam, actually. It's called zakat, which is charity, and you give to the needy. And I think, that was Rami's intention, but through process of like, I don't think his intention was to necessarily convert him. I think he really just wanted to help him out. And Mahershala Ali's character said something where like, like he gave him an example of how someone helped someone in the Quran or something. It was like some sort of like fable where they helped him they helped the lady instead of resenting her and hurting her and treating her with hatred.
It's the woman in the trash. It's definitely a parable in the Quran.
And that she converted to Islam. So it's just interesting how like even that story foreshadowed what was to come.
What might have come, because Dennis did attack everyone. It was very crazy. But what were your thoughts on Dennis Amir Yas?
I like Dennis, but I'm kind of in between where Nikki and Mina are kind of sitting, because I feel like he was doing it just to look good. So I feel like it was actually pride of him trying to help Dennis. But I also do agree with the fact that a lot of times converts get kind of lost in the whole juice and get excited and want to, save someone. But Rami's in no place to save anybody. Like, I think that, even if it is part of the tenets, I don't know if he was really thinking, I'm being a good Muslim. I think he was just like, I want to be a hero and feel better about myself by focusing on someone else. So he's not actually doing any of the spiritual work. So it's kind of the lazy man's approach.
Well, we've heard this for the second time in these two episodes, how selfish Rami can be. The first one, it's I haven't considered it. I don't consider anything. I only consider myself. And this one, it's at the front when the friends call him selfish. You're the most self-absorbed person I know. Zainab is also reluctant, the daughter of the Imam. We get to meet Zainab's character. Do you each quickly feel that something could happen between Zainab and Rami? Did anyone else get that feeling?
100%.
Is giving a yes.
100%.
Mina says a possible maybe. Nikki says 100%. We'll see how that manifests itself. We get the pussy Muslim, which is the way that people get annoyed that there's no Z in Muslim. Dennis wants to be halal. He finds his path to Islam. He actually takes Shahada in front of everyone. And then he goes and attacks the protesters. We already knew he was problematic simply because of the PTSD. Did the attack come out of nowhere, Nikki?
No, absolutely not. He was already triggered by the prayers. We knew that was already going to be an issue, potentially an ongoing issue. And the fact that all of them walked through the protesters like, what the hell? No, I knew some stuff was going to jump off. Yeah.
Mina, were you able to predict that as well?
I actually didn't predict that. I had a bad feeling. I didn't think that was going to happen per se. I actually thought it was going to be him attacking Mahershala Ali's character, just because I thought that would trigger him more than the outside noise of the protesters, especially because he was a veteran in the Iraq War. I can't imagine him going there, hearing those noises of the call to prayer in Iraq, and then coming back and then hearing that again and having to create a new association in his mind and make that connection one that is like a peaceful association and a good one rather than a really traumatic one. I think traumatic memories are stored differently in the brain than other memories, so I feel like it's gonna be really hard to like unbreak that link, and I think he's constantly gonna be triggered because PTSD is real and it affects, you know, a lot of people who go to war and have to experience that.
It is very real. Amir, how did you feel about it?
I mean, I could have predicted it from a mile away because when someone has PTSD, and again, this is not Dennis's fault, it's 120% Rami's fault. He lied, he was selfish, he just wanted to save this guy, didn't care about the repercussions. You should have set him up with like a counselor, not put him in a mosque. Like, and listen, if you haven't been in the Middle East, the calls to prayer can be triggering. It's every 5 times a day, and it's quite loud. It's not like a silent noise. Like it is the entire, you know, everything's blanketed with that noise. So it can be quite triggering.
It can be triggering, and it was for Dennis, who attacked one of the protesters outside, leading to what possible repercussions we will find out as we go on to episode 3. But before we go there, let's jump into our special segment, Meaning, where we find out a term or a custom or a part of the culture and interpret it for all. Mina, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so for today, I'm going to use a word that Rami says repeatedly in episode 2. He keeps saying, inshallah, inshallah. And inshallah just means if God wills it. It's like the new, like in my childhood, I always thought inshallah as no. It was like my parents' way of saying no to things, but like a fake promise of like, oh, hopefully if God allows it, and it was always a no, but it literally means if God wills it, like hopefully, maybe if the circumstances allow. So it's something that a lot of Muslims say.
It's actually something that a lot of people in the Middle East, regardless of their religious affiliations, say. Because the word Allah simply means God. A lot of people are very interested in learning that other religions use the word Allah. And also, we saw today in this episode that people are interested in learning that Muslims believe in Jesus as well. Jesus for Muslims is the highest prophet, right beside or next to Muhammad. So it's very interesting of the understanding.
Jesus has a verse in the Quran, Tehran. He has a whole verse. So,
and it's one of my favorites. Jesus, Tupac, all of their verses in the Quran are amazing. Let's jump into the concept that we're going to go into episode 3 with all of you. We appreciate all of your comments, your feedback. Thank you so much. If you're listening to us on iTunes, give us that 5 stars. We so greatly deserve. We will be back with more Rami, episodes 3 and 4 right after this. Where can people find you if you want to be found? Until then, Amir Yas.
You can find me at Amir Yas, AMIRYASS _ on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
Yes, you can. Mina.
Hey guys, you can follow me at Mina Makes Magic on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter as well.
And of course, Pastor Bailey.
You can find me at Nikki Bailey _ on all the social medias.
A lot of underscores because we underscore everything you need. Of course, you can find me at I Am Tehran. Literally, I am Tehran. And find me hosting and paneling on a slew of other AfterBuzz after shows because all of your favorite TV shows are my favorite TV shows too. Until we're back in 1 hour, we're going to watch the episodes back to back and discuss them for you right here. Stay tuned. Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.